Super Mario 64 is a video game. Video games have bosses, and so Super Mario 64 has bosses. There are 9 of them, and I'm taking the liberty to rank them from worst to best, in my personal opinion, of course. So what differentiates a boss from being a grade A slammer to being a grade F dumper? Well, there's a few criteria I look for when wanting a truly engaging boss battle. First, it's gotta have a badass atmosphere, right? Like, I'm talking about an intimidating foe that strikes fear into my heart upon sight. I'm talking about an epic theme that amps up the emotions of the fight, an arena that adds more depth to the setting, a plot or a backstory that raises the stakes, whatever applies. Now, this is Super Mario 64 we're talking about, a game over 25 years old with a focus more centralized on 3D platforming than interesting and dynamic boss encounters. Not to downtalk the bosses here in any way, I'm just saying don't expect the battles to be bombastic epics in the same vein that something like the Dark Souls series can muster up. You know, you gotta cater the expectations on a game-by-game basis. Next up, I want some difficulty, man. These are bosses after all. The baddest of the bad. I want them to test my abilities up to that point in the game and make me feel challenged throughout the fight. But not so hard that it feels like unfair bullshit, because, most importantly, I want the boss fight to be fun. Interesting gameplay, engaging mechanics, fair difficulty, all that stuff. So with those things in mind, let's run up with the worst boss in Super Mario 64. At the 9th spot, the bottom spot, I'm talking about Big Mr. I. It didn't even cross my mind to count this guy as a boss, just because of how nothing this fight is. The wiki says he's a boss though, so I don't know. I guess we'll roll with it. He's just a larger version of the regularly occurring Mr. I enemy, which is literally just a giant eyeball. A giant eyeball that's quietly tucked away in the attic of the mansion in Big Boo's haunt. The fight, if you even want to call it that, is nothing more than just running one lap around the big goober, which is apparently enough to daze and confuse him into an instant death. I'm not even sure if he attacks. I presume he does, because his smaller minions can shoot these, like, bubbles at Mario, but these mini versions have put up plenty more resistance than this boss version, in my experience. Seriously, the whole encounter ends in a matter of seconds. I don't even know what future me is doing for footage on screen while I talk about this, because this boss goes down so quickly. All of the challenge surrounding this level is just getting up to the attic in the first place and finding the secret room that Big Mr. I is in. If we're talking about level hazards, then I'd have less to harp on, but when you slap the label boss onto Big Mr. I can't help but feel utter disappointment. At number 8, we got Big Boo, who sits down here because of a lot of similarities to Big Mr. I. It's essentially just a larger version of a regular enemy with a boss fight that's over as quickly as it begins. 3 boots to the face and minimal resistance, or interest. I'll give credit where credit is due. Big Boo will at least occasionally phase out and become intangible when Mario is facing towards him, just like the older games, which provides the smallest, and I mean the smallest, tiniest amounts of what I guess is strategy when it comes to timing your attacks. Big Boo also gets the leg up in atmosphere, which isn't saying much compared to Big Mr. I's lack of any atmosphere, but a creepy-faced ghost does overshadow an eyeball. There are actually 3 different encounters with Big Boo over the entire course of his map. First is in the mansion lobby after killing all of his Boo minions. I actually like the periodic shit-talking he throws during the first meeting, claiming how ghosts can't die. It adds some character. Makes you wonder who's talking that smack. On the second go, you battle Big Boo in a merry-go-round room with fire jetting out of every wall. I think this is the best arena for Big Boo because of the environmental challenge. The last fight occurs on the mansion balcony where you have the least amount of room to work with, but it doesn't really affect the fight in any meaningful way. I appreciate the changing scenery, but it doesn't change the mind-numbing simplicity of this boss fight. Up next at spot number 7, we got the Big Bully. Again, not climbing up high because it's just a larger, regular enemy without being any more complex. Gotta knock out all these examples at the bottom of the list while I can. I guess I'm still somewhat intimidated by a glaring ball with devil horns, especially when he's trying to knock me off the platform surrounded by lava. That's actually the most fun part about this boss, is fighting him. It's like a game of bumper cars. While he tries to knock you off into the lava, you're trying to knock him back into the lava. This is the only form of offense though, so if you mind your positioning and stay centralized to the platform, he's practically harmless. In fact, this larger version is easier than the standard bully enemy because his size makes him a bigger target to the boot. There are 2 encounters with the Big Bully, but they're practically identical, so not much more to comment on there. Pulling up the 6th spot, we got the Ice Bully. This guy is, well, carbon copy blueprint of the Big Bully. Like, literally, they are exactly the same fight. Bumper cars, and all that. The bully sibling bosses really could trade each other places for the 6th and 7th spots depending on personal taste. I myself like this icy blue variant more. I think it's just visually a more pleasant boss to look at, but that's the absolute only thing setting it apart from the lava variant. Now we're moving on from the bottom of the barrel to the most mediocre boss in Super Mario 64. At 5th place, I'm talking about Wiggler. I don't exactly see a cute little caterpillar with a flower in its head striking fear into my heart, so kinda losing points there for me. This is the first boss on the list with some valid motive against Mario. Hell, Mario completely floods Wiggler's house. Wiggler was just minding his own business. In fact, Mario starts the assault here. Wiggler isn't hostile until receiving the first blow. After that though, the fight just boils down to 3 jumps on Wiggler for the win. All it does is chase Mario to ram him head on, sometimes from weirdly random and I guess cinematic camera angles. For being the penultimate boss fight of the game, I'd kinda hope for something way more challenging and thought-provoking than jump on head. This fight is as average comes. At least it's more unique than a common enemy but bigger, and at least there's some story to why we're fighting Wiggler, but the actual fight just leaves a lot to be desired this far into the game. Moving on to rank 4, I have Big Bob-omb, the very first boss of the game. You want to talk about a ruthless killer? This is a king who waged civil war against his own Bob-omb people, even to the point where they turn against him and help Mario. Maybe you could call that incompetence rather than ruthlessness, or arrogance, because Big Bob-omb spouts that in spades, even revealing the method to defeat him directly to Mario, thinking it won't matter. Being the first boss fight of the game, it acts as a good introductory course to the new 3D mechanics of Mario 64, i.e. grabbing and throwing. You need to grab and throw Big Bob-omb to the ground 3 separate times. He'll put up his guard and quickly turn to face you after each blow, so there's slight adaptation on his part to prevent an easily spammable win. He'll try the same grab and toss method on you though. Granted, when he does it, it doesn't deal damage to Mario, so it lowers his overall threatening nature and difficulty of the encounter, making it kinda rather easy. Well, that is, unless he chucks you off the mountainside, which punishes you not only with fall damage, but an annoying trip back up to the top of the mountain to restart the fight. Call him King of the Hypocrites though, because if you get any ideas about throwing him off the mountain, he won't take any damage and instead chastise you for underhand and dirty tactics. The biggest flaw in this boss boils down to the grabbing mechanics. So many actions in this game, such as diving, punching, are tied to the same button as grabbing as well. This leads to a lot of frustrating moments where you may go in for a grab, but end up diving or punching the air, blowing your chance in the moment to damage the boss. Big Bob-omb's boss fight also acts as a training round to the eventual bouts you'll have with Bowser, who you could probably guess is pretty high on my list considering I haven't discussed him yet. Big Bob-omb lands is the first truly decent boss fight on this list, mostly marred by the act of having to grab him and the wrestling of the controls that comes with that. His easy difficulty is fitting for his accessibility as the earliest boss encounter. Pulling up the bronze medal in the top 3 spot is the Womp King. There are plenty of similar parallels that can be drawn between Womp King and Big Bob-omb. They're both early game bosses, sitting high atop their respective worlds, and Mario must traverse a hazardous course to climb up and face them. Although, in my opinion, Womp King outshines Big Bob-omb in every measurable metric. A slice of Womp King's backstory is shed while talking with Mario, and it gets a little too real. Womp King mentions how his people build the roads and walls of the Mushroom Kingdom, yet they are quite literally stepped all over by the Kingdom elites. I mean, damn. Way to paint a harsh reality in the Mario universe, my man. While Big Bob-omb blows his own troops to smithereens, King Womp stands up and fights for the working class. Makes you wonder who the real villain here is. On top of that, Womp King is easily the most intimidating boss in the game. Look at this beefy man, he doesn't even fit on the screen, he's so large and in charge. King Womp will try to faceplant and, as a result, squash Mario to death under his solid rock body. That's also where he shows his weakness, as the goal is to bait King Womp into lying flat so you can perform a ground pound on his cracked and weakened back 3 times. It's not difficult by any means, but again, he's the second boss in the game and is a considerable threat early on. I definitely think highly of this boss, and obviously, based on the placement, consider him one of the better bosses in Mario 64. And the silver medal goes to Iroc, the desert deity tucked away in the Pyramid of Shifting Sandland. This guy has got the mystery to him. On your first playthrough, you really don't expect to have a fight with him once finding the secret entrance into the pyramid. He's pissed that Mario has intruded into his sanctuary and reveals himself as 2 stone hands with eyeballs in the palms before cracking a pun about settling things hand to hand. You know what, that pun is what landed him at 2nd place instead of 1st on the list. I mean, not really, but At first it's a cheesy pun, but it's actually a subtle hint that throwing some old-fashioned fisticuffs is the way to settle the fight. He'll literally be throwing hands too, but when the opening to strike his eyes appear, you gotta take them. He'll take the precaution needed to protect his eyes with his stony grasps though. It's pretty challenging compared to the other bosses in this game, and actually pretty fun. He's a cool boss that encourages using one of the game's new mechanics without handing over the win on a silver platter. In case it wasn't obvious enough, the best boss fight in the game is taken by the main baddie himself, Bowser. Now there are 3 different fights with this guy over the course of the game, but they're all essentially the same, at least mechanically. Each battle rises in difficulty from the last, and I'll talk about what changes as it goes on. Let's cover each of the key points real quick. How do you have more atmosphere than Bowser? The guy started his trouble in the first minute of the game. He took all the Power Stars, Princess Peach, and is the reason why this whole adventure is happening in the first place. Now I'll be honest, 3D didn't do much to help Bowser in the looks department. I mean, ugh. His head looks like a fat version of those staple removers you always play with in class, you know what I mean? Call your buddy over, you stick his finger in it, you rip the finger right off. Just kids messing around. Regardless, it's hard not to be afraid by a spiky fire-breathing turtle beast. Every fight plays the same, similar to the Big Bob-omb fight. The idea is to maneuver to Bowser's rear, except here you want to grab him by the tail and spin him around before sending him off to one of the many bombs conveniently surrounding the arena. The first fight in the Dark World is pretty tame. Bowser puts up a minimal amount of effort. On the second fight in the Fire Sea, Bowser starts spitting fireballs around the arena and tilting it, forcing Mario to slide closer to the edges into the lava. And by the last encounter, you know you're in a final boss fight. The dark background surrounding this floating island with a dramatic theme to boot. Bowser now takes 3 bombs to the face where he could only take 1 on the previous 2 fights, and at certain points the entire chunks of the stage fall away, making a neat, albeit precarious, star shape. These Bowser fights suffer the same flaw as Big Bob-omb fight, where the grab button is tied to several other actions that you'll execute by mistake. Controls end up contributing to the fight as a third participant. Despite this flaw, the challenging difficulty, spooky mood, and pure impact of Bowser makes this the most prominent and real-feeling boss fight in Super Mario 64 for all the right reasons. Do you guys agree with me? Disagree? Maybe meet in the middle and compromise on a couple? Let me know how you feel on these bosses in the comments below. You really want to be a boss yourself, you'll hit those like and subscribe buttons too. That way you catch whatever else I upload next. Catch you guys around.